嗨，大家好，我是 Mars。今天是2021年的11月4号，在11月3号的凌晨，美联储公布了最新的议息会议结果，缩减购债正式启动 tapering 开始了，大概会减少150亿的购债每个月。那我们来看一下具体包大人在会议上面说了什么。
At the Federal Reserve, we are strongly committed to achieving the monetary policy goals that Congress has given us: maximum employment and price stability.
一开始还是重申说，美联储的工作就是确保最大就业跟通膨稳定。
Today, the FOMC kept interest rates near zero, and in light of the progress the economy has made toward our goals, decided
现在利率还是一样，重申是零利率。
to begin reducing the pace of asset purchases.
有提到了，已经确定会缩减购债了。
Economic activity expanded at a 6.5% pace in the first half of the year.
上半年的 GDP 是6.5%，
reflecting progress on vaccinations, the reopening of the economy, and strong policy support. In the third quarter, real GDP growth slowed notably from this rapid pace.
在第三季的时候 ，GDP 的增速有放缓。
Activity has also been restrained by supply constraints and bottlenecks, notably in the motor vehicle industry. As a result, both
主要的供应链短缺，特别在汽车的行业上面体现出来。
With COVID case counts receding further and progress on vaccinations, economic growth should pick up this quarter, resulting in strong growth for the year as a whole.
他说，虽然上个季度的 GDP 增速有放缓，但他认为这个季度的 GDP 会跟上，而且全年的 GDP 增长会非常的强劲。
Conditions in the labor market have continued to improve, and demand for workers remains very strong.
就业市场的复苏很强劲。
As with overall economic activity, the pace of improvement slowed with the rise in COVID cases. In August and September, job gains averaged 280,000 per month, down from
8、9月份的时候，就业增长是28万每个月，
an average of about 1 million jobs per month in June and July.
相较于6、7月比有大概100万的增加，意思就是就业也有增速放缓。
The unemployment rate was 4.8% in September.
9月份的失业率是4.8%。
This figure understates the shortfall in employment, particularly as participation in the labor market remains subdued. Some of the softness in participation likely reflects the aging of the population and retirements.
他认为这个就业放缓的原因有一部分的原因是因为人口的年纪到了退休的状态。
But participation for prime-aged individuals also remains well below pre-pandemic levels.
但是呢，未退休年纪的人呢，还是目前的就业是低于疫情前的水平。
In part reflecting factors related to the pandemic, such as caregiving needs and ongoing concerns about the virus.
还有一部分人是对疫情持续担忧，导致他没有投入就业。
The supply and demand imbalances related to the pandemic and the reopening of the economy have contributed to sizable price increases in some sectors.
提到了通膨高涨是因为供应链的原因。
In particular, bottlenecks and supply chain disruptions are limiting how quickly production can respond to the rebound in demand in the near term.
供应链的瓶颈导致呢没有办法快速的回应需求，进一步导致通胀的上升。
As a result, overall inflation is running well above our 2% longer run goal.
现在的通膨的状况是高于他们长期的目标2%的。
Supply constraints have been larger and longer lasting than anticipated.
这时候他又再提到了之前一直强调暂时性的通胀问题，但是看起来供应链的问题会持续的更久，比他们预期的还要久。
Nonetheless, it remains the case that the drivers of higher inflation have been predominantly connected to the dislocations caused by the pandemic.
高通胀是由于疫情的原因呢所导致的。
Specifically, the effects on supply and demand from the shutdown, the uneven
特别是因为呢供给跟需求从呢关闭到重开的原因。
reopening and the ongoing effects of the virus itself. We understand the difficulties that high inflation poses for individuals and families, particularly those with limited means to absorb higher prices.
高通胀对每个家庭的影响是很大的，
essentials such as food and transportation.
尤其是在食物跟交通的部分。
Our tools cannot ease supply constraints. Like most forecasters, we continue to believe that our dynamic economy will adjust to the supply and demand imbalances.
他说，美联储的政策是没有办法解决供应链的问题的。
And that as it does, inflation will decline to levels much closer to our 2% longer run goal.
但他相信呢，最终长期供应链的问题会被解决，然后恢复到他2% 的长期目标。
Of course, it is very difficult to predict the persistence of supply constraints or their effects on inflation.
但他有提到呢，他没有办法，或者说他很困难的去预测这个通膨到底什么时候会回落。
Global supply chains are complex. They will return to normal function, but the timing of that is highly uncertain.
要准确的预测高通胀什么时候回落呢，是有很大的不确定性的。
We are committed to our longer run goal of 2% inflation and to having longer-term inflation expectations well anchored at this goal.
但他相信最终呢，这个通胀呢一定会回落到2%，跟2% 以下的，就回到他的长期目标。
If we were to see signs that the path of inflation or longer-term inflation expectations was moving materially and persistently beyond levels consistent with our goal,
他说，如果他有看到呢，通胀有失控的状况，没有回落，失控的状况远离他长期目标的话呢，
we would use our tools to preserve price stability.
也就是他会用工具来确保物价的稳定。这里讲的工具指的就是升息。
We'll be watching carefully to see whether the economy is evolving in line with expectations. Our asset purchases have been a critical tool. They helped preserve financial stability early in the pandemic, and since then have helped foster smooth market functioning and accommodative financial conditions to support the economy.
强调了呢，购债，购买国债呢是稳定经济它很重要的一个措施。
Last December, the committee stated its intention to continue asset purchases at a pace of at least $120 billion per month until
从去年12月开始呢，美联储决议呢每个月购买呢1200亿的国债。
substantial further progress has been made toward our maximum employment and price stability goals.
这个政策就是为了去稳定最大的就业跟物价。
At today's meeting, the committee judged that the economy has met this test and decided to begin reducing the pace of its asset purchases.
今天的会议决定了要缩减购债了。
Beginning later this month, we will reduce the monthly pace of our net asset purchases by $10 billion for Treasury securities and $5 billion for agency mortgage-backed securities.
在11月稍晚呢，就是这个月晚一点呢，就会缩减100亿美金的国债购买，以及50亿美金的抵押贷款债券购买，加起来就是150亿。
We also announced another reduction of this size in the monthly purchase pace starting in mid-December, since that month's purchase schedule will be released by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York prior to our December FOMC meeting.
然后下一次缩减购债的内容会在12月中，在他的 FOMC 会议前来宣布。
If the economy evolves broadly as expected, we judge that similar reductions in the pace of net asset purchases will likely be appropriate each month, implying that increases in our securities holdings would cease by the middle of next year.
然后呢，结束所有的购债呢，到明年的年中，中间的中。
That said, we are prepared to adjust the pace of purchases if warranted by changes in the economic outlook.
所以他已经做好了呢对经济的预测呢，以及缩减购债完整的一个退出计划。
And even after our balance sheet stops expanding, our holdings of securities will continue to support accommodative financial conditions. Our decision today to begin tapering our asset purchases does not imply any direct signal regarding our interest rate policy.
再次强调了，缩减购债跟升息呢是没有关系的，就怕市场觉得恐慌。市场之前就预期这一次的 FOMC 议息会议大概缩减购债是150亿，所以消息公布呢也算符合预期，所以市场的反应呢看起来是比较平淡的。美元指数的部分呢只是小跌0.22%，就是基本上没什么太大的变化。黄金的部分呢变化也是不大，大概小涨一点点0.63%。但是这个美国10年期的国债呢，刚刚有提到已经开始缩减购债了，也就是说缺少了买盘。 开始少了150亿每个月。可以看到10年期国债利率呢，在昨天公布以后呢，就有点上涨了，涨了1.55%，算是涨得比较多了。但是呢，理论上美国10年期国债利率如果上涨了呢，那么应该会导致纳指就是科技股承压。但是看起来这个美国的3大股指对这个150亿缩减购债的事情已经做好了心理准备了，所以说呢，符合预期。市场上不但纳指没有跌，反而还涨了1.08%。那标普500的部分呢，也涨了0.65%。那道琼斯呢，涨了0.29%。所以看起来呢，这一次的 FOMC 会议缩减购债150亿呢，是大家预期内的事情，符合预期。对整个市场呢，不管是美元指数、黄金期货，以及3大股指影响不大，然后美债10年期是影响的比较大的。那么接下来就像他刚刚提到了，下一次呢，缩减购债的公布呢，会在12月中。那他刚刚有提到会在美联储议息会议之前可能就释放风向。那我觉得他下一次的缩减购债的金额呢，应该还是要看这个11月份的失业率以及呢月底公布的 PCE 通膨数据来决定。如果通膨进一步的恶化呢，我觉得它有可能加大这个缩减购债的力度。但是如果通膨的状态有和缓呢，我觉得它就维持现在的150亿。因为以现在的状态来看，每个月缩减150亿的购债呢，刚好到明年的年中，也就是8个月，就可以把1200亿的购债全部结束掉。目前的状态看起来还是比较温和，维持一个软着陆的状态。相较于加拿大之间就叫停了 QE 跟英国要准备加息来讲，它的利率政策或者说货币政策还是相对的比较宽松的。OK， 那么以上就是今天的节目啦。不晓得荧幕面前的你对这一次美联储的议息会议有什么看法呢？欢迎在荧幕下方留言。如果你喜欢今天的节目的话，那就记得给我按赞、订阅、分享，记得打开小铃铛。股息成长存股，打造被动收入。我们下期再见，拜拜。